Okay.
Okay.
Hola, hermana, ¿cómo está?
Muy bien, gracias. ¿Y usted?
Muy bien. Perdón por estar tarde.
No, está bien, muchas gracias. Okay. I'm going to try speaking in English. Well, in Spanglish, but I have my interpreter here. So if you have any question, you can tell him. Thank you for this opportunity, and thank you for help me with my assignment. I'm going to start, well, my husband is going to start asking some questions, and you could answer in English or Spanish, what you prefer. Okay.
Great. That sounds, and Teresa, this is for a class BYU pathways that both of you are taking, or just you, Hermana?
No, just me.
Yeah, okay.
Sí.
Okay, we're ready.
Okay.
Okay. Question 1, it says, what attracted you from each other and how did you meet? How did you meet when you first starting to meet each other?
You want to?
I will tell my story, and it will have to be in English.
Sí, okay.
I'll try to speak slowly, but I think your English is really good, hermana. So hopefully you'll get it. Ralph lived in London, over in Europe, when he was in high school and middle school. And I was in 8th grade, and I lived in a town in California where all of his relatives live. And I was the babysitter for one of his aunts and uncles. And I also cleaned house for them. And so I knew that one summer, Ralph's family was coming from London, England, to spend a month in California. And so I knew that because I had to help clean the house and get it ready for company to come. And I knew that Ralph was coming. I heard that there was a 9th grade boy coming in the family that would be there. And so on Sunday, the day they arrived on Saturday, and on Sunday they showed up to church. Well, Sunday morning, my girlfriends and I was in 8th grade. We were standing outside of the church house, and we were just talking until it was time to start church, and then we'd go in and sit down by our families. And so we were standing outside when the car that his grandfather drives pulled up. And so my girlfriends and I, we all started watching because we knew that this family had come to town from England. And I saw Ralph get out of the back seat of the car, and he walked around the car and he opened up the front door, and his mother got out. And then he opened up the other car door in the back seat, and his sister got out. And I said to my friends at that time, I'm going to marry him. Then I said, or somebody like him, because if he is that kind to his mother and his sister, think how he would treat his wife. So that was my first initial time of meeting him.
Okay.
So he left a big impression.
So for me, I had.
Do you want to do this in Spanish?
Yeah. ¿Cuál prefiere, en español o en inglés?
English, please, because I need to practice.
Okay. When I was growing up and in high school and started dating girls, there were no members of the church in my school, and so the girls that I dated were not members of the church. They were good, but they were not members of the church. And when I got to know Teresa in Southern California, I just saw her as a very spiritual person, very dedicated to the church, very dedicated to the gospel and to living it and to serving in it. And I just had kind of the same kind of thought. It's just that someday I want to get to know her better, or someone like her, because she was so dedicated to the gospel. And for me, that was very important. I wanted somebody like that as a wife and as a mother of my children. And she just had those kind of qualities. And besides that, she was really cute.
Okay. Muchas gracias. Digo, thank you so much. And okay. The next question.
Next question. How would you explain your dating experience in terms of for how long you were dating before you got married, and what kind of activities you used to do together, like to get to know each other and all of those kind of things while you were knowing each other?
So we started dating after my mission was over. We knew each other before that, but we really didn't date much until after my mission. And when I got home, we started dating, and we dated for only about 4 months before we got engaged.
We were at BYU.
Yeah, we were going to school in Provo at BYU, and we started dating, and we just did kind of typical things. We would go on dates, bike riding dates and picnics in the canyon and that kind of thing. One thing I do remember that Teresa tells this story, I'll go ahead and tell it for her. We had a date to go up to the canyon for a picnic, and all of a sudden I realized I had a stake priesthood meeting that same afternoon on a Saturday afternoon. And I told her, I said, I apologize, but I've got this stake priesthood meeting and I'm going to have to cancel our date. And I thought that she might be a little concerned about that. And she said that that was one of the things that she was really impressed with, that my priesthood meeting was important enough to cancel a date for it. And so that turned out to be actually a good thing, not a bad thing.
Well, it again told me the kind of person he was. And I will tell you another date when we first, let me think, when Ralph was going to BYU as a freshman, I was a senior in high school in California, in my hometown where his grandparents lived. And Ralph's uncles also lived in the community in California, and they're both dentists. And Ralph needed to have his wisdom teeth extracted during his freshman year at college so he could get ready to go on a mission. So he came down for a long weekend in California so one of his uncles could extract his wisdom teeth. And while he was recovering, his grandfather said to Ralph, "Ralph, if you would take Teresa Tibbetts out on a date while you're here, I would give you $5 and my Cadillac so you can take her on a date." He really wanted one of his grandsons to marry one of the Tibbetts girls. There were 5 of us, and he wanted one of his grandsons to marry one of us. So,
and I had never driven a Cadillac. I thought it sounded like a great opportunity.
Ralph thought, man, if I can have $5 in my grandpa's car, I'll do that. So
that was our first date.
So he took me on a date, and we went to like a 7-Eleven. I'm trying to think what it would be like.
OXXO.
The OXXO. He took me to a place like that, and we bought a bag of potato chips. Now, I didn't know that he had $5 to spend, but we bought one bag of potato chips, and then we went to a playground, and we sat on the swings, and we ate potato chips and talked. And I remember thinking, that is one of the best dates I've ever had. It seemed like anytime I'd go out on a date, a boy would pick me up, we'd go to a movie, we'd come back home. We never did much talking. We were watching a movie. And I just remember thinking, that is really creative. And I knew more about Ralph after that date, and he knew more about me than I did any of the other dates that I'd go on. And that left an impression with me also. And I will say that that is what our dates were when we were in college, because neither of us had much money. And I remember one time I opened the door and he had picked some wild flowers on his way over to give to me, you know. And so I think, to me, the simplicity of our dating is what impressed me as much as anything, because I think we were falling in love with each other in a real way rather than somebody trying to buy my love.
Thank you for sharing your experience. And we're going to move on the next question. Thank you.
Next one. Okay.
Personalmente, ¿qué influyó más en su relación? ¿Lo espiritual o lo temporal?
Oh, personally, what had the most influence in your relationship, like temporal things or spiritual things?
What happened with it?
Which had a stronger influence, temporal. For me, I think clearly spiritual things.
Mhm.
I think the spiritual emphasis that she put in her life was very important to me. And I think we did things that invited the Spirit to be with us. And I don't, it wasn't about money and it wasn't about big activities. I think we just enjoyed that spiritual part was important to both of us.
Ralph and I are very, very different in lots of ways. We manage time differently. The things that he loves to do, I don't enjoy doing as much, and vice versa. We do try to do what each other likes to do, but we are different. But the things that were very much in common were the eternal things, the things that really matter. And I always like to say, I don't know what the word is in Spanish, but we were equally yoked. We were the things that were most important eternally, we are not different in. We're different in other ways, but not spiritually.
Thank you. Thank you.
How did you know that you wanted to marry each other?
So I think that came to me first. and I just felt from the first time I got off my mission, we started dating, that everything about her I liked. And I think as we dated, we didn't date that long, 4 or 5 months. And I just had an impression by the Spirit that this was somebody that I wanted to get married to. And so I asked her to marry me, and I was quite certain she would be absolutely ready to be married. So I said, Teresa, will you marry me? And she said, no. And I was shocked. and she said, because in her patriarchal blessing, she had been promised that she would have a spiritual revelation of who the person should be that she should marry. She said, I just haven't had that.
My patriarchal blessing said I would know, for certainty. And I know a lot of people don't have that, but my blessing made it very clear that I wouldn't be wondering at all. And we had fasted and prayed together about getting married, and it felt really good to Ralph. And I just didn't feel like I had that confirmation that my blessing led me to believe I would have. So I did turn him down. And Ralph said, I think I could convince you to marry me, but I'm not going to. And so we said goodbye. We went our separate ways for about a week. And both of us felt pretty sad and pretty down in the dumps. Well, after about a week, Ralph knocked on my door and had come. He had been teaching at the MTC in Provo. And so he had finished his session of teaching the missionaries, and it was quite late, but I was up studying, and he came in and he just asked me how I was doing. And I told him, not very well. I'm pretty sad. And he said, I am too. And he said, do you mind if we just have a prayer together? And so I said, no, that would be nice. And so we had a prayer. And while he was offering the prayer, all of a sudden I had a feeling, and I always describe it as it started from my head. And it just felt like something ran through my body and went all the way down to my feet. And it was such a warm feeling. And I thought, this is my answer. This is who I am to marry. And when we got done, I just felt like the prayer would never end. When we got done, I told him, Ralph, I just had that confirmation I'm looking for. And so we went on from there.
Oh, okay, thank you. ¿Cuánto tiempo pasó desde que tuvo esa respuesta hasta que se casaron?
About 4, yeah, you got it.
4 more months.
About 4 or 5 more months. So we dated for 4 or 5 months. We got engaged, and then about 5 months later, we got married.
Okay.
So we didn't take a lot of time.
School started in September in Provo, and then at Christmas time we were engaged, and then as soon as school ended in April, we got married.
Okay. Thank you, thank you.
Now, I wouldn't recommend, I just think everybody's relationship is different, and I don't think it has to go that fast. But I do think the things that we were focused on were grounded enough and spiritual enough that I do think that we had an understanding more of who each other was. I think being members of the church is an important thing, because when you meet somebody and you learn about their family, you learn a lot about them if you're a member of the church. Because if the guy you're meeting says, "Oh, my mom's the Relief Society president," or "My dad is, on the High Council," we know what that means, And so I think there are a lot of things that we automatically had in common when we met. But I wouldn't necessarily say a relationship, if it's right, can always go that fast. I think it's different for everybody.
I used to always tell the missionaries when they would leave, it's not about time, it's about knowing that it's the right person. And when you know, get married, don't wait.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your advice. Next question, please.
¿Tienes counseling? ¿Son como pláticas o que alguien se haya dado consejo?
No, creo que son como,
Ah.
I don't know, no sé cómo es el proceso. Ya si quieres
Okay.
preguntar.
The next question is about if you had any premarital counseling, because I believe that doesn't happen here in Mexico, or I don't know. Well, it happens, but we just never did it. But there are some like talks or sessions of counseling that couples should have before they get married. I don't know. ¿Por quién? Por el gobierno.
Por el gobierno, creo que-
Yeah, given by the government. So, or at least that should happen. So I don't know. The question is, if you had any of those premarital counseling sessions, and if so, what type of counseling it was, and you would recommend for couples to have those kind of premarital sessions? If so, why not? That's the question.
If I remember right, didn't we take a marriage class at BYU? Was that before we got married?
It was a marriage class, but that's just because we chose to.
Yeah, right. But I don't recall any specific counseling.
No.
I mean, the closest that we did was we took a marriage class at BYU as part of I think it was a religion class. But anyway, that's about it. I think that I would say taking some counseling would be helpful. But I think that we live in a generation that puts so much emphasis on counseling and advice that they could go on forever. And so I would say some counseling is fine, but I wouldn't overdo it.
I would say, when I think about our premarital counseling, it was really more from parents or friends or relatives, people
Yeah.
that we trusted, that we loved their marriages. I remember when we became engaged, there were some people at church who said, "Oh, good luck," and you're about to lose your freedom, and that said a lot to me about their marriage, and I would not want to have counsel from them. And there were others who were so excited and said, "Oh, this is just so exciting for you, and we're so happy for you." And so I think the better premarital counseling is from people that you know and trust, and you see what their marriages are.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sí, yes.
Next one. Ahí donde está. How do you split or divide between both of you all the different like duties and responsibilities and chores at home and family functions, etc.? How do you do that process of dividing who is in charge of doing what, etc.?
I think Ralph and I would be considered way more of a traditional couple than your marriage, for example, or as we've been in the homes of our children, it's way more hands-on, with the husband being very much a part of the things that go on in the home. But with that said, Ralph was very much a part of our home. And he was not above vacuuming or helping to clean house, and he was very happy to do those chores. But for the most part, I enjoyed being in charge of that. And I knew that Ralph was earning a living for our family. And so I tried to do a lot of our household things during the week so that on weekends we could work together as a family in the yard or go on a fun family outing. I didn't want to be holding all the things up that I could do at home while Ralph was at work. I wanted to get those things done so that when he was around, we could enjoy family time. But
I think part of that for us, that's a little different than some people. Teresa wanted to be a homemaker and a mom. That was what she wanted to do. Her goal was not to have a profession in business or the business world. And so I saw my role as being responsible for the income and financial parts of the family. And Teresa really saw her role, and she wanted it to be caring for children at home and raising a family. And so we tended to both feel very comfortable with looking at that in that way. And I understand that that's different than a lot of people have it, but that's how it was for us. And for us, I think that's worked out pretty well, because I think that, I never felt that my work was more important than her work. In fact, in many ways, the work that she did all day, every day was the core work of our marriage. Our core work was to bring us and our children home to Heavenly Father. And she got to spend all day, every day focused on those issues, while I spent 8 or 9 hours every day earning money. I was happy to do that, and I was fine with that responsibility, but I never felt that that mine was more important than hers or hers than mine. They're just two different assignments, and we feel like in our marriage it worked out pretty well for her to focus on a lot of the homemaking issues and me to focus on a lot of the professional issues.
And I couldn't have stayed home and done what I did if Ralph weren't out providing for us. But I also watch our children today, and their husbands are and Ralph was one, I could give Ralph a child and say, will you go help him get ready and change a diaper and go give them a bath? I mean, Ralph was fine to do any of that. It's not that he was above that. But and so I felt like we worked well together. But I do find our children the husbands in our children's families are very much more engaged in preparing meals, all of that, because the mothers are a little more outside of the home than I was, and so they have to balance that differently.
Gracias, sí. De hecho, es algo que estamos aprendiendo como en la clase, como esos cambios de antes, que la familia era más tradicional y ahora su nombre es egalitarian, algo así, egalitarian.
Equalitarian?
No, egalitarian. Ajá, es un nombre que se le da a ese.
What's the name that you give it now?
Let me see, wait.
In Spanish.
No sé la palabra en español, pero es
Pero en inglés?
egalitarian.
Egalitarian?
Egalitarian marriage.
Oh, so kind of equal, yeah.
Uh-huh.
This is the concept that they say about the new marriage.
Yeah, no, I think that's very much the way. Having spent 3 years in the temple, I find it interesting, the sealing ordinance in both for the man and the woman. You make a covenant to live to live the divinely appointed role as husband and divinely appointed role as wife. Now, it doesn't describe exactly what that is, and I think that that's good, but I think what we found is our marriage worked well, in part because Teresa was really happy with the work she did, and I was really happy with the work I did. Both works were important, and it's not that I never did house or work in the house, but she had the primary responsibility for that. And for us, it worked out pretty well.
Thank you so much. The next question.
Next one.
How are we doing on time for you? Are you okay on time?
Like on the Zoom, does it cut off at a certain time?
If you want, we can.
Creo que si es con una nunca se corta.
No, sure.
Sí, porque cuando, I think when it's just one-on-one, just two people on the Zoom session, it never cuts off because I use it to give some
I think
English
you're right.
classes and
Actually, I
class,
think you're right.
class. Sí,
Yeah.
sí, no, pues,
If it's just one and one, that doesn't, there's no time limit.
Oh,
I think you're
okay.
right, yeah.
okay. Let's see, next question. Talking about child rearing practices or raising the children, do you think that the way you did it with your own children was very similar to what the way your parents raised you? And whenever it comes to, oh, well, before when your children lived at home, would you always agree in the way of correcting your children and discipline or giving discipline to your children?
Well, I think the first part of the question, did we bring things from our own homes into our marriage? And I think the answer is yes. And we both grew up in really good homes with, she had sisters and one brother. I had 2 brothers and 2 sisters. And so we both grew up in homes. And I think we both brought a tradition of having to be responsible to work in the home, to do your chores, to earn some money. Work was important. Going to church was important. And so I think we both brought those kinds of things. I think that her family was a little bit more, I think my family was more casual in some things. Her family had family home evening every Monday, and my family, sometimes we did and sometimes we didn't. And so when we got married, I saw some of the things I liked from her family that I wanted to make sure we did in our home. And I think she saw things in my family that she really liked, that she wanted to make sure that we did.
In our home, we were much more rigorous about doing things, but I didn't know how to play. Ralph knew how to bring fun into our home. And so that's what we found coming from both homes was we took the good from both homes and tried to, put it into our home. Then go ahead.
Well, I think that's the kind of first part of the question. I think in terms of discipline, I think we both shared a very common philosophy about discipline. One was that we think that discipline is important. We think that the parents having rules for the home and how this home is going to be run is important. Sometimes we look at some homes and we feel like the kid is running the home and not the parents. And we felt that the parents are responsible to set the tone and the environment and the culture of the home. And so we had very specific rules in our home that you had to do, and our kids knew that you had to do them. I mean, they had chores they had to do every day. They had work they had to do. They had to get their schoolwork done. They were expected to go to church. They were expected to be quiet in church. And so we had a lot of structure, I would say, compared to some families. And I think if we were doing it again, we would probably do it about the same. Because I think there are a lot of kids that grow up with no structure hardly at all. And that makes me a little bit nervous.
I will also say that it was really important to us that we were on the same page. And because of our differences, there are times when we probably weren't. And so, but we made it very clear that we needed to be on the same page and, present the same common thing to a child.
If Teresa said something to one of the children, and even if maybe I'd have done it a little differently, I supported her. And she did the same for me, because we didn't want the kids to split us up and divide us.
And there were many times where we would go later and just have a conversation by ourselves about maybe doing that differently the next time. Or there were many times where the kids would ask us, and my response would be, I need to talk to your dad first and we'll decide and then I'll get back to you, or vice versa. But we really tried hard not to let our kids undermine us and game us by saying, Dad said we could do this, and so can we, so I think they learned pretty early on that we were going to converse with each other and that our answers would be the same. Going back really quickly to what we brought from our homes. One of the things my dad used to say that has stayed in our home, we've raised our children this way, was My dad used to always say, if we're too big, like, okay, let's say we're ready to get to seminary or something, and we're in a hurry. And my dad says, well, we need to have prayers first. And I'll say, no, we can't. We don't have time. We're going to be late. And my dad's philosophy always was, if we're too busy for something important, we're too busy. So he used to say, if we're too busy to pray, then we're too busy. And we need to start learning how to manage our time better. Or if we're too busy to have scripture time as a family, then we're too busy. We're going to have to start getting rid of some of the activities that keep us from doing things. And so that was a philosophy that came from my home that we implemented. And, you know, if we had planned that as a family, we were doing a service project at church or something, and they'd say, we're too busy doing basketball and everything else. And we'd say, well, then if we can't figure out how to do that, then we'll have to get rid of basketball, you know? And so the kids just learned that, you know, and I remember one day we had to do a service of raking leaves and everything, but our kids had games all day that day. And so we said, then we'll get up at 6 a.m. If the games are important enough to you to go to, then we'll get up early and get the raking done. And they couldn't believe that we would do that, but we did. We pulled them out of bed on a Saturday morning at 6. We started raking leaves, and they were all kind of grumbly, but next thing you know, some of them turned on music and it blasted through the yard. And next thing you know, the kids are throwing each other into piles of leaves and having fun. And we just realized the importance of making sure certain things happen, because you can, as a family, start going lots of different ways if you don't make an effort to do things together. And so I've always loved that notion of, if you're too busy for important things, and get rid of the things that are keeping you from doing that.
Thank you, sister.
Just two more. No, cierto. Más. A ver, yes. How dice, how do you maintain marital satisfaction? Talking about like feeling like yes, like that feeling of fulfillment in the marriage.
Well, one of the things we've always done, and this was something that also came from my home, but my dad, it was very important to my dad and my mother that they had a date night once a week. And I learned that from my parents, and Ralph and I implemented that from the very beginning. And when you have 9 children, it's easy as your kids get older to kind of drift away from that. You're so engrossed in what your children are doing. But I knew, and I looked forward to knowing that every week on a Friday night or a Saturday night, Ralph and I were going to have time together alone. And sometimes that meant we'd, get the kids to bed and walk around the block and come home and eat a bowl of ice cream, or, whatever. But, so sometimes our dates were more elaborate than others, but I always knew that I could look forward to a date night every week. And we still do that to this day.
Yeah, I think that's important. I think one of the other things is just making sure that you're on the same page on how you want to run the family. One of the things that we started doing, not at the very beginning, but pretty early in our marriage, was we would have an annual planning session where we would get together and we would really just talk together about what do we want our family to look like and feel like in our home. And we would get very specific about, how we wanted the children to interact with each other, with us, what was important, what were the values that were most important in this home. And we would do that once a year. And then about once a month, we'd just take a look at it and say, how are we doing? And we'd say, we said we want the kids not to argue with each other. And yet these 2 kids are always arguing with each other. What are we going to do to help them work on that? And so I think making sure, taking the time to get us on the same page was really important and very helpful.
But also to just keep our marriage alive. I know Ralph continues to open car doors for me. When we, even as a big family, if we had opportunity to sit on a bench together, quite often he was up on the stand, but if we had opportunity to sit on the bench, he'd like to sit by me. And we have all these kids, but we would manage which kids needed our attention most and put them by us. But Ralph and I would be by each other and hold hands when we walk. And so there are a lot of little simple things that just is a way to keep that marital satisfaction, alive.
And I think also, like Teresa said, she and I are very different in a lot of ways, but she tried things that were new for her. I mean, I liked mountain climbing, and she had not really been a big mountain climber. Well, we went through many years where we would hike mountains together on a regular basis, and it wasn't because she loved that, but she came to enjoy it and really like it a lot more than she thought she would. At the same time, she liked music and plays and that kind of thing, and I did, a lot more of that than I would have if I had married somebody else. And we came to enjoy the things that each other enjoyed. And I think you got to take time to, to value what the other person likes and to share that.
And speaking of that, just learning the love language of your companion. Because for me, if Ralph would empty a dishwasher or vacuum a living room for me or put toys away, those things was a language of love to me. But Ralph doesn't care at all about messes in a house. It doesn't matter to him if his bed is made or anything. That doesn't matter. But if I sit down and hold Ralph's hand and tickle his arm and go for a walk and talk with him, that is his love language. And so I think it's really important to learn what the love language is of the other part of the other spouse and fulfill those needs. Don't, initially I'd change our sheets on our bed and I'd say to Ralph, we have clean new sheets to climb into bed tonight. Well, that didn't mean anything to Ralph, he didn't care if they never got washed, but then when I gave time to go on a walk with him or tickle his arm, that meant a lot to him.
¿Ustedes creen que su lenguaje del amor cambió durante todos estos años o siempre ha sido el mismo?
Do you feel like your love language has changed after all these years, or has it always been the same?
That's a good question. I think that it evolves a little bit. I think that the basics between us have been very similar. I mean, I liked out-of-door things. I liked activity kind of things. Teresa liked the house being clean and being organized and things like that. And I think that those things have stayed very much the same. But I think that
kind of, because I think to your question, I don't care as much about the house anymore. I have learned that relationships are way more important. Like if we walk out of the house and the kitchen still is dirty because Ralph wants to go on a walk, years ago, I would have said, we've got to get the kitchen cleaned up first, But now, if there's this window of time and it's going to get dark and we can't go later, then, so I do think it has changed a little where I start realizing relationships are more important than checking things off a list all the time. And I think Ralph has come to learn that he likes order in the home more than he thought he did.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Okay.
Because it's not quite as chaotic, so.
But I think for one, I think you've got to make sure that you have time for each other and time together, the two of you. When you start having kids and you got a couple kids or 3 or 4 kids or 9 kids, life gets really busy. And I think you've just got to make time, whatever the activities are that you enjoy, and it'll be very different for each couple. But I think finding time for each other and together is really important. And sometimes with family and business and church assignments, we let things get so busy that we put those things off to the side. I think that's really important not to do.
Okay. Just wait a minute.
Noemi, how many children do you have now?
2 daughters.
Okay, 2 daughters. How old are they?
And one had 4 years old and one just one.
Oh.
I'm going to show you.
She just woke up.
Oh, fun. And what's her name?
Ailani.
Ayani.
Oh,
Hello, you girls. ¿Cómo
girls.
están? Qué bueno verlas.
Oh. ¿Cómo se llaman?
Lía y Ailani.
Oh,
Preciosas.
sí. Qué bonitas.
When you come to Mexico,
Okay.
I came to Mexico for our
Reunion.
she
Creo que sí. ¿Hace cuánto fue?
tenía 3 meses. Yes.
Pero hay dos, ¿no? Cuando fuimos al buffet.
Pero no, pero en la primera tenía.
When you came first for the first reunion you had in Mexico, was that one?
Yeah,
She was just like 3 months old.
That's right.
I remember that. Yeah.
and then in Puebla, she'd have been 2 years.
Yes.
Yes.
No, yes.
Oh, qué
Well, these are
linda.
beautiful young girls.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next question. Have you ever had any strain in your marriage? And if so, how did you overcome the problem? Or whenever there is some kind of
Conflict.
disagreement, we could say, how do you usually get it resolved?
Well, one thing that I would say, because of course, we've had plenty of strain and tension in our marriage. Every marriage does. And I think that's just part of two people that are different being together. And so one thing that we would talk about from the very early years of our marriage is that we shouldn't be surprised when there's tension, because anytime the two people have a different opinion, there will be a tension. We wanted to make sure it didn't become contention, because there's a big difference between tension, difference of opinion, and contention, argument. And sometimes, you know, we would not do well, and we would fall into arguments, and we would feel bad afterwards, and hopefully learn how to be better and be more patient and more understanding and we're still working on that. I mean, that doesn't go away when you're 30 or 40 or 60 or 70 years old. You know, we still work on how to manage the differences that we have in ways that are caring and loving and not contentious. And for the most part, we do pretty well. And every now and again, we stumble and we don't do so well.
I think if we can always keep the eternal relationship in mind and realize that we're on the same team, and then try to work on Christ-like characteristics ourselves and try to become better with those qualities in ourselves, we do get better. And I would say that we get better now with our conflict than we did years ago. It seemed like years ago when we were so busy, it was easy to just kind of be upset and move along because we had to, but it isn't healthy. And I know Ralph is a real communicator, and he wasn't one who let things go. Now, he knew for me that I needed a little bit of time to calm down, and then we could talk about it later in a calm way. But I do think that it's important, I mean, to know that certainly we have had a lot of strain throughout our marriage, but communication is a big thing for Ralph, and I am grateful for that, because he made us sit down and talk about things and not just kind of let it blow over, and because it's so easy to bring things up later and throw them on each other if you don't resolve things at the time.
Fue muy difícil comprender, por ejemplo, que para usted era necesitaba tiempo y para él era como importante hablar.
Mhm. Was it hard to get to that in sync of knowing that for him it was important to talk things right now, and maybe for you, sister, it would take you a little bit longer to want to talk about it? Or how did you were able to get to that understanding of someone wanted to talk things and then someone not really at the moment?
Well, I think it takes a lot of work, because I think most people want to think that their way is the best way to do things. And I think, you know, I needed to be patient enough to understand that Teresa can't talk about it right now. And so I would hold off until the next day or the later in the day. And she learned that there was some value in talking about it as soon as you can and not letting it just go. And so I think you both need to be aware of what is important for the other person, and not think that your way is the only right way. I think that's the biggest thing. I think we get too convinced that our way is the right way of doing everything, and it's just not. They're different. It doesn't mean it's necessarily better, but they are different. And I think you've got to acknowledge the differences and change how you do things.
And knowing that we were going to talk about it, whether I wanted to or not, there were times, and there are times when I can say to Ralph, I am fine to talk about this right now. Or I will say, you know what? I know myself well enough that if we talk about this right now, I'm going to say things I wish I wouldn't have. And so I promise that we'll talk about it, but give me an hour or whatever. And it wouldn't be too long before I could go to Ralph and say, I think I'm able to talk about it. I felt like I wasn't one. I feel like I'm not one who is very articulate. And I don't know how to kind of put my words and thoughts together as quickly and as well as Ralph. And so if we're kind of talking in the heat of the moment, I feel like he always gets the upper hand, because I don't know how to explain what I'm trying to say. And so sometimes I just need a little bit of time to formulate. But the thing that I have learned is when we do take the time, when both of us are willing to admit that we each have a part in it, it's a lot better. I remember an experience one time when Ralph and I were painting with each other, and I don't even remember the problem that happened, but we were painting the walls in our house one Saturday afternoon, and something had happened, and we really had a misunderstanding. And I was pretty upset with him, and he was with me. I had to take off and go pick up some kids at the school and from a practice and come back home. And on my way there, I just said, Heavenly Father, help Ralph know how wrong he is. And I just thought, he just doesn't get it. And then all of a sudden, in the quiet of the drive to the school, I started having this impression, put yourself in his place and see it the way he might see it. And by the time I got home, I was able to go into Ralph and say, Ralph, I can understand why you feel this way, but this is why I don't. And anyway, it was such a eye-opener to me to think that my way is right all the time, and it isn't, and to realize that we both play a part in things, and to look at how we can make an issue better, not always looking at how the other person can.
Thank you so much. And last question, yes.
What advice would you give to someone who is considering getting married?
Well, I think what comes first to my mind is I would try to encourage them that marriage is a good thing. Teresa said earlier, sometimes some people talk about all the negative things in marriage, and every marriage has challenges. But I would encourage them that I think marriage is a great thing. I have loved our marriage. I think we've learned a lot. And so one, I would encourage them to take marriage seriously. I would encourage them to find somebody that has the basic things of the gospel and their life goals similar. I would tell them that they're not going to, just in picking the person that they get married, that doesn't promise them that everything will be successful or not, that they have to work on it every day after their marriage. And so I think that's some of the advice I would give. I mean, marriage is important, but get ready to work for the rest of your life at making it work really well.
Ralph has always said to people that when you marry, there are seeds to divorce, or what, how would you say it?
I would just say that within everybody, including us, there are the seeds of divorce and there are the seeds of success. And the difference is how you do all the kind of things we've been talking about today. And I think that you're never going to know when you make the decision to marry somebody. When I made the decision to marry Teresa and her me, that doesn't promise us that everything's going to go fine. And we got to work at it every single day. And so I would say, get married, ready to work at making your marriage successful for the next 50 years.
And I would just add to that, to me, there are times when I see couples in long-term relationships where they're not married and they're not progressing, they're not fulfilled. They're kind of just, they get together and they watch shows together and all of that. But when you're married, you start down a path of having some common goals and you set goals to work towards. And it seems it's so much more fulfilling. So if you found the right person, absolutely, I would encourage you to marry, because your life can only get better as you work together as a team, and you just improve and become better people when you know how to work with somebody else. When you're single, it's a pretty selfish life, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay. Well,
Noemi, remind me of your husband's name.
Yael.
Yeah, spell it.
Y-A-E-L.
Yael. Okay. What would that mean in English?
The name.
Is there such a thing?
I don't think so.
I think it's a Jew name, and as far as I can remember, it meant something like God's power, of the power of God, or something like that.
Yeah,
Okay.
El is always the Hebrew for God. El.
Oh, then yes, it should be something like that. Yes,
So
it's
Yael.
power of God or something.
Like Yael, I think you've been almost a part of our mission as much as anybody, because I remember when you came to the mission home or the mission office with is it Noemi or Naomi? Are you Noemi?
Naomi.
Yeah, that's what I think.
Naomi, it's like,
Yeah.
it's like a Naomi.
Anyway, I remember when you brought him to the mission office even before you were married, and then you've been along to every reunion, and I just feel like you're I feel like you're one of our missionaries, just like your wife
Yeah,
is.
thank you. Yes, actually, that first time that we met, well, that I met you was, I think, the second day.
time.
Yeah, it was just the second day that we had seen each other.
Oh,
So-
that you were
so, yes.
dated. Oh,
So
like
it's
where are
weird.
you from?
I've been living here in Puebla for like 18 years now, but I'm originally from Veracruz.
Okay, why were you with her there? Were you in Veracruz then?
No,
Yeah,
I was already living in Puebla.
Okay.
So,
Yes, but in the south part of what would be the South
Okay.
Mission in Puebla. But yeah, well,
How did the two of you meet?
we met, well, I met her family first, actually, because her parents were like a service family in El Benemérito when it was still a high school.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so her parents were, I think, were the, I don't know. Yeah, there was leaders in my ward at the Benemérito. And so I met her parents first, and then met her sister first, because her sister is the same age as me. And then we just found each other on Facebook, basically. We added as friends each other because I knew her family, so I accepted her request, and we just started casually talking through Facebook. And then she remembered that I live here in Puebla, so when she got her calling to serve here, she asked me questions about the weather and people here,
Uh-huh.
things like that. And that's pretty much how we started talking more often. And then I was writing her while she was on her mission, like, you know, I hope
So you
you're
had known
doing
each
fine
other
in
before
Puebla and things
before
like
her
that.
mission.
I'm sorry?
You had known each other before her mission.
Yes, we knew each other, but we really started talking more often
After.
after. And we didn't knew each other in person. We
Uh-huh.
just started seeing each other in person after she came back to see you. And then that's when she took me there to
Oh,
see you.
that's
Well, you guys
great.
are doing good things. And I'm
Yeah.
sure that you, like every marriage, have things you need to work at. But you're a good couple. You're both good people, and you're doing the things that I think will make you happy in the long term.
Thank you.
And thank you for your time, for
Oh, you're
helping.
welcome. It's so fun to see your family.
Yes. And well, we hope we can see each other in person again.
That
Not
would be
We,
great.
as COVID starts to go away, we need to plan another time down in Puebla. Maybe. Well, how's the temple coming? Do they have a date for the temple opening?
Now I don't know.
Maybe the next year.
They are working really hard on it, but yes, I don't know exactly when it is planned to be finished now. No.
We'd love to come back down to Puebla.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's
You should.
así está nuestra misión.
Well, we love you guys. Thanks for thinking
Good to
about
see
us
you.
and asking these questions.
Thank you for your time.
You're
I
welcome.
appreciate.
You're welcome.
Very happy to see you.
Have a good weekend.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Bye.